Hello, my friends. This is Andy Falco Jimenez coming to you live from Yorba Linda, California. And I am sorry, I was having little technical problems and it's still not where it should be. I don't know why I look like President Trump here, all orange, but it's a little wild. So I'm going to have to live with it, I think. Let me just try to make a little adjustment here. I can't figure out. There. I'm bald. Okay, here we go. All right, we're gonna have to leave it at that. Sorry, I'm not gonna mess around with it anymore. I don't know why I'm orange all of a sudden. Hey, so last night's school board meeting was spectacular. If you attended and you've never been there before, it's a little bit similar to what we were going through in COVID. I'm not sure which one was more wild. Because the memory hole of the madness of COVID, I think, has left me. COVID for me was one of the best times in my entire life. It was life-changing. It was fantastic. I can't even tell you. But what we're going through now is different. I'm going to talk about a syndrome which became very apparent yesterday that I believe was also apparent and has been apparent since the COVID days or since 2016. And it is a serious medical disorder, and I'm going to show you the facts. But just to give you a little background, last night's focus was mostly on a policy and a resolution about supporting law enforcement. And this was a requirement by the state of California that the school districts, by a certain amount of time, I think it's by March 1st, put in a policy which still has to go through the process of being voted on by the school board and that kind of thing. And some wording and that kind of stuff has to be agreed on. And so this thing is required by the state of California. So what's interesting is that you had a group of people in the community and teachers within the school, and of course, members of the school board. I love that I got spoken about in quite detail without my name being mentioned by the current APLE president. Who is in denial, obviously, but this narrative that this resolution had some wording in it, and you're going to hear it. I'm going to play some videos of some of the speakers last night, that they were told a lie and then adopted the lie. Now, they've adopted a lie about ICE probably over the last several months, in particular within the last year. And I'm going to explain why I say that and why that's important to understand, is this adoption of this lie. Now, you have two things you need to consider about this, or need to know about this, is that you have people that know it's a lie and then create a lie and with purpose and intent put out the lie in order to affect the people that are going to be affected by the lie. And so you have these two things going. Last night, what I was hit with, and I believe Todd Frazier and he and I had a little discussion after the first break, is that, and this part of it I didn't discuss with him, but that we realized that this was going on, this disorder that I'm going to tell you about, is that for me, driving home, and then a really good discussion I had with my wife today. We were reading the Bible, and a particular verse in Hebrews 11, 33 through 40. And as we read that, we began talking about some other things. And we have to have compassion for these people that are victims. I would say there are 50 victims in that room, including the most heinous people that spoke with the most vile language. But it is obvious that they are suffering from this disorder. I'm trying to think of better words, because when you say disorder, it sounds like you're saying somebody's crazy, but it is a disorder. It's like a disease. It's something you get infected with, but there is hope. There is cure. They're not going to, they're most likely not going to die from it, but they could put them in a position where they could get injured or hurt, as we saw in Minnesota. Those two people that were, one was shot because they were using a vehicle as a weapon, and another one who had a gun in his possession as a weapon, that they suffered from this very same thing. And so you can die from this if you take it further than just speaking out at a school board meeting. And so I have compassion for those people because I really do believe that they are victims in this social media war and this narrative that the NEA, the National Educators Association, the CTA, the California Teachers Association, and the APLE, the Association of Placentia-Yorba Educators, that this cabal of teachers, unions, and I'm going to go into more detail. You notice this is part one. I'm going to do part two, and we're going to go in greater detail about how the teachers union has created this issue in many ways. But I have some compassion for those people that are victims of this. But I don't have as much compassion, and this is what my wife and I were talking about, is that we have these members of this community, and I was talking to her about the despicable motives of people in our community who they really don't have any reason for involving themselves in what's happening in our school districts necessarily in this manner, in the sense that they are injuring children and adults within our community with the lies that they've created. And this is the thing that makes me angry, is that you have grown adults that we saw last night. And I'm going to share with you a couple of, at least one video here of one of those adults. It's a young adult, but it's an adult who, in his role as a socialist and seemingly a member of the socialist group, came to the school board meeting and to push the lie. I don't believe he really believes the lie. I think he's following the direction of the socialist leadership, that this is how we get people to join our movement. And create people that will go out in their street and put themselves in danger. We need to do that. We need to poison their minds with a lie, because they're going to adopt the lie as part of their life. So let me play. I'm going to change things around than what I intended, but let me play this guy he said that he was a leader of the socialist movement, at least a part of the socialist movement, and then I'll give you the definition of the disorder that I'm talking about and the description of it. So here's this guy that was talking last night. I'm not going to use any names today. That's one of my things that I'm going to try to stay away from as much as possible, just because it gets convoluted of who I'm talking about and who's doing what and that kind of stuff. So we're just going to say very specific about the things that are happening and why it's important to understand why these things shouldn't be happening and the victims that it creates in this narrative that has been created. So here's this guy that spoke last night.
Hi, my name is Ubaida. I'm a organizer with the Party for Social Liberation, and I'm here to talk to all you about not voting for Resolution 2525. That's because we don't want violence to be a common thread or a common interest for our students. This is going to be opening our schools to ICE. ICE has already killed 2 people in Minnesota. Blades herself has a history of violence, being a former cop. We understand this. We don't want Blades or anybody really here to make our students, our families, feel more unsafe than they already are. The federal agencies are already on our backs, and the school should be a safe place for us, our students, and everybody else. And just one more thing about this specifically. Voting yes on 2525 makes it clear that you're standing with the federal agencies that are attacking our families as opposed to our families ourselves. You're standing with the violence that Blades and ICE perpetrates as opposed to the safety that we as students and families are asking for. Thank you.
So understand that the words that he selected there and purposefully used, and that was law enforcement, and that they're violent, and pointed out that Leander Blades, being a former police officer, is violent. And this is the lie. This is the start of a lie to create a narrative that law enforcement, not just ICE, law enforcement, and then eventually he said ICE, are violent, and they have been violent towards children in school, and wants to create this picture, this narrative, this lie that you should be fearful of ICE law enforcement in our schools. Understand that ICE has never been on a campus in Placentia-Yorba Unified School District. In the past, all the way up to today, as school got out, they had not entered any school district. They've also not entered any school in any school district in the United States of America. This has not happened. That has never happened. And I said this before, it is not going to happen. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But I just want you to understand that he's painting a picture that ICE coming onto campus is a danger and is going to put children in danger, and they should be fearful. They should be fearful of Leandra Blaze because she's a former cop and she's dangerous. That law enforcement has a history of being dangerous, and that people have been killed, and building up this thing. So you then have people who are susceptible to believing these lies. And this is where I'm going to share the definition of the syndrome that I'm talking about. So you understand that it is real. And if you were at the school board meeting, or if you have a chance to watch the school board meeting, you can go to PYLUSD.org and go to school boards and then school board meetings. And then you'll see, you could play the recorded version of the school board meeting last night. And if you're so up to it, you can take it. I know people that came and they had to walk out because they just couldn't take the nonsense that was going on. That you will see speaker after speaker after speaker that have been victimized by men like him and other people in our community. So let me talk to you about this syndrome. And it's really important you understand it. This is real. I now, as an expert witness in criminal matters, and I testify in courts all over the United States, I've talked about this syndrome. And one of the aspects of it is confirmation bias. And you'll see that that's in there too. And so I've been studying this for 20, 30 years. And this syndrome is real, and we can see it in action at the school board meeting. So what is this syndrome? It is called shared psychosis, or folie ado. I knew I was going to mess that up. Folie ado. That's what it used to be called, but now it's called shared psychosis. And what it is a psychiatric delusional disorder where a person adopts and fully internalizes a false belief or delusion originally held by someone close to them, such as a family member, partner, or friend. In this scenario, the inducer, the person sharing the false narrative, transmits their delusion to the recipient, who comes to believe it an absolute truth, integrating it into their own identity and worldview despite evidence to the contrary. This often occurs in isolated or codependent relationships where the recipient is suggestible, dependent, or psychologically vulnerable. Those are all very important words. Suggestible, children in our schools, students in our schools; dependent, people that are dependent on having relationships, and they get FOMO, or they get really distressed or depressed when they don't have a friend or they don't have somebody that they like. So they're dependent on other people. Or psychically vulnerable. Again, that's a number of kids that they've indoctrinated over the years in our schools with CRT and SEL and DEI. Those people that have been affected by it can be psychologically vulnerable. Understand the relationships there. And the last one was friend. Know that social media has become the friend to many people since 2010. In 2010, on the spectrum of people that have depression and anxiety is down here. And then 2010, the smartphone was invented. And then you see a spike in anxiety and depression in young people, everybody from elementary school to junior high to high school to college age, and then their early 30s. You'll see this spike in 2010 with the advent of smartphones. The smartphone has become a friend to many people. So when that says friend, understand that when many people that have these smartphones and have become addicted to them, that has become their friend. So the friend is speaking to them more so than probably anybody has in their life. And they're watching these videos saying, you are oppressed, you are a victim, you should be sad, you should be fearful of ICE, you should be angry at what's happening to your neighbors, you should be angry and sad about these criminals that are getting arrested. They are the victim, and police officers are bad. And this phone is speaking to them over and over and over again. So understand when it says friend, that it also is attaching itself to what would be today's smartphone. The next part of this says they repeat and embody the narrative as if it were their lived reality. If the lie is not delusional, but simply misinformation, this behavior might instead reflect high suggestibility, cognitive biases like confirmation bias, or the misinformation effect, where external false information alters one's memory or beliefs. And so what's saying about this other stage of this syndrome is that they begin to adopt it as if it actually occurred. And you'll hear it in some of the speeches. I'm not going to play all the speeches. I'm only going to play 3. But they adopt it as if, and we heard even Marilyn Anderson say, these things are happening. And they've created this narrative that ICE is going into schools. And you'll hear people say, we've seen ICE going onto schools. No ICE agent, no Border Patrol agent in the United States has ever gone on to the campus of a public school, K through 12, and drug children out of the schools. They have not gone onto the campus to arrest children. They have not done this. But you hear repeatedly over and over again that people have adopted this into their memory as if it has occurred because of this syndrome. And in many cases, again, they're victims. And we must pray for them, and we must have some compassion for them, because they are hurting and seriously suffering from this syndrome. And so we're going to go into what can be done with people like this if somebody is so inclined to help somebody that's going through the syndrome, because it is real. You may think that I'm making all this up. At the bottom, you'll see down here that I referenced the Merck manual, the professional version. This is the leading source of psychologists and counselors and psychologists to go to when looking up, for references in regard to mental health and other medical issues. It is the leading manual for them to go to. And this is where this is from. This isn't from Andy's handbook. This isn't from, some far right book that I read, from Pete Hegseth before he became Secretary of War. This is a medical manual, a professional version of the medical manual. All right, this third part. If this pattern causes significant distress, impairs functioning, or involves bizarre beliefs, which we heard last night, I'm going to play one of those videos, it warrants evaluation by a mental health professional for potential underlying issues like psychotic disorders, personality disorders, or trauma-related vulnerabilities. Treatment often involves separating the individual, therapy, cognitive behavioral approaches, and sometimes antipsychotic medication for the primary case. So this is a syndrome that actually exists. You have how somebody gets caught up in the psychosis, and then you have the cure. And again, this is from a professional psychological manual, medical manual that has been in there for, I think, 100 years, maybe longer, maybe a couple hundred years. I think the book was created in the 1800s. So this has been going around, and it's been updated, obviously, every year. And it's still in there, and it's been there for many, many years. This is something that has happened for years. You can see that this quite possibly was the issue during the witch trials in Salem, that this may be the syndrome that was occurring then when people believed that people were witches. So this one part of it is interesting, because we saw some of this last night, where you see significant distress because somebody adopted this into what it is that they believe is happening around them, but it's not happening. I know it's not happening around them, but they want to believe that this is happening around them, that they've seen ICE agents on school campuses taking kids out of classroom, and they're crying last night. You have people that are suffering from it so badly, and they're shaking and they're crying. And then Marilyn's going, see, it's happening. And she is a part of it. Marilyn Anderson is a part of it. Oh, I wasn't going to use any names. And so this school board trustee was affirming, so I hate that word affirming, was affirming to these people that she knows it's happening, and you're right by saying it's happening, even though it's not happening, and creating it. And it just creates more anxiety and depression in these people. And so this is where we're at. So let me give you a couple examples. I'm going to play 3 speeches. And let's see which one I want to give first. Let's do This lady's a counselor. And so you can see this affects even people that are seemingly educated. So this first woman that I'm going to play for you, she was number like 7 or something like that. This spoke. We had 53 people speak or something like that. But she is a counselor. So you can imagine somebody that's a counselor that's suffering from the syndrome about something that's not happening. It's not happened. It didn't happen today, and it's not going to happen in the future. But she speaks to it as if it did happen.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tara Crone. I'm a mother of a child that goes to Wagner. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, and I am trained in trauma-informed care and ACEs. For those of you that don't know what ACEs are, it's adverse childhood experiences. I want to speak today regarding Resolution 2525. I'm deeply concerned for the well-being of our children. The presence of ICE on a school campus would profoundly traumatize not only the children that could potentially be intercepted, but also for the many children who would witness their classmates being removed by force. Research consistently shows that exposure to fear, instability, and perceived threats to safety can have lifelong impacts on a child's physical health and mental health, academic performance, and sense of security. Schools must be safe spaces, places where children feel protected, supported, and able to learn without fear. Allowing enforcement actions on campus undermines the safety and creates harm.
So she's bought into the narrative that this is going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it's sad that her job is to deal with children who have suffered from traumatic things that have occurred in their life. But she's suffering from a version of the syndrome herself. And that is unfortunate because, again, she's now internalized or taken this lie and now is speaking about it as if this is something that is happening or going to be happening in our schools on a resolution that doesn't say anything of what she said. The resolution itself and the policy that was approved itself said nothing about promoting or assisting or just allowing ICE to come on whenever they wanted. It said nothing like that, but she's been told a lie and she believes the lie, even though she probably read the policy. So that's the part where it says, even though they're given the information that is true and factual, they still ignore it, or they just can't see it, or they claim that that's a lie when in fact it's the truth. And this is I would say a mild version of it, but this is where it starts. And this is, again, she could be somebody that knows the truth and knows this isn't happening. It's possible. But I believe that she has the early stages of this. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not diagnosing her. I'm just telling you that what I see seems to be in line with what we're hearing here. Here's an educator. And so these are some of the people that suffer from it the most because they've bought into this and they are firmly in with the teachers union. Some of them, not all of them, some of them. And this teacher is fully bought in to the lies and has accepted them and is in the belief that they are actually happening when they haven't happened. So here we go with the educator.
As a community member and educator, I oppose Leandra Blade's proposition for ICE cooperation in schools. With Latinos making up 45% of the student population and one of the most heavily targeted groups by ICE enforcement, Leandra's proposition is inherently violent. It's ridiculous that a school board whose mission is to prioritize a place conducive to learning is seriously considering allowing literal children to be assaulted by adult federal agents. ICE has already killed multiple people since the reign of terror began. So for Leandra to propose ICE cooperation means she does not care whether our kids live or die. Leandra Blades does not see our kids as human beings, and if you ask me, someone like that should not be making decisions for kids. And if any other school board member is in support of this proposal, then you too are complicit in the violence against our kids and our community and should be terminated from your position. ICE out of OC and ICE out of schools.
Okay, once again, that's an educator who has completely bought into the lie that kids are going to be attacked, they're going to be hurt, they're going to be killed, she says. She says that Leandra Blades is putting kids in danger from a resolution that says nothing about ICE being allowed to go on the campus without a warrant and assaulting children. It says nothing like that. It follows the state law that was required by the state for every district in the state of California to follow, and that is to understand that when law enforcement, federal, state, or local, has a warrant to come onto the campus, that they should be respected and allowed to do their job without interference. And if they don't, that they should use reasonableness in dealing with it and contact the superintendent. That's all it says. But she was told a lie that Leandra Blades' resolution that she proposed and brought in said something completely different. And she believed it, and she truly believes it, and she sold it as if she believed it. And that is what was happening last night to a number of people. So I brought you the person who's propagating the lie so that it spreads and other people begin to believe it. So, and he's probably on social media, but he's just one of many sources of this type of lie. I'm going to go into another lie that's really based here in our community in a minute and show you that it is a lie, and they knew it was a lie and they did it anyway, but they know it's a lie. So he knows it's a lie. The counselor should know not to do this to children, to cause fear and anxiety in children by saying something that's not true, but apparently she believes it too. She's been caught up in this syndrome. And then now you have an educator who has it a little bit worse and doesn't know how to use the word literally properly in a sentence, but so much for that. She's an educator. And then saying that Leandra Blades should resign because of a resolution that says nothing of what she said it says. Very crazy. So now I'm going to go to an extreme version of somebody who has this syndrome. In my opinion, again, I'm not a doctor. He's going to have to go get his own diagnosis. I'm just suggesting that it fits the description that I read, but this person apparently has it really bad. So here we go.
My name's Al Judd. I'm a father of a kid that goes to El Dorado, and I'm here to talk to you. This ICE is not legitimate law enforcement. They are not here to enforce laws. They are under a directive from Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, which is part of the Heritage Foundation Project 2025 mandate. They are not accountable. They have no identification, and they're recruited from the same alt-right militias that you spent January 6th with at our nation's capital. They're the same people.
Excuse me, we want to be able to hear. Please keep it down.
And you are intending to infiltrate our schools with those agents to destroy these minority kids? Are you out of your mind? We will not tolerate, I will not tolerate, I will fight to defend and support this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you are a subversive domestic enemy of our country, and I will not tolerate it. You can sit there with that silly little smirk on your face all night long. These kids are giving you Martin Luther King energy right now. That Malcolm energy is coming.
Next.
Wow. He's a dad. This was wild, but here are the lies, just so you know, ICE is law enforcement. And I've said this before, but I'm gonna say it again. They are almost more law enforcement than I was as a police officer, or Leandra Blades as a police officer. That's not, technically it's not true. However, as a police officer in the state of California, Anaheim police officer, I was only a police officer in the state of California. So I had limited powers as far as the country. ICE has legal powers all over the United States of America and its territories. They have more so-called law enforcement powers than local law enforcement. So to say they're not law enforcement is somebody who suffers from the syndrome because they believe the lie that is being sold to them on social media, in the news media like CNN and MSNBC and the others, that they are saying that they're not legitimate, or The View saying that they're not legitimate police officers, that they're untrained. that they have no ideas. You're required to have an ID on you. They have ID that's in their pocket if it's not on their chest or on their belt, if they're trying to go undercover to try to find somebody so they don't get identified. We do this all the time. We have undercover people all through the community. You don't even know. They're in all the stores. They have long hair. They quite often have a gas station attendant shirt on that has a different name on there, like Fred, and their name's not Fred. Law enforcement officers do this all the time. It is a regular practice of law enforcement when you are enforcing the law and trying to catch somebody, and you want to get close enough before they run so you don't have to chase them down and tackle them and get into fisticuffs, and then potentially cause injury or death. And so he has it really bad because you can tell by the way he was pointing at Leandra and the way he was talking that he truly believes the lie that he has been told. This is a classic case, in my estimation, based on what I read you from the manual, that he truly believes this and he lives it. And it's become part of his being that he hates Leander Blades so much because of the other lies that he's been told that it has affected him. And I have compassion for that man. I have compassion for his I think it's just a son, he said, and his family, because this is harmful. It's harmful to him. It's obviously causing distress. It's causing anxiety. And this has been caused by the people like the socialist leader, like people that are posting things on the internet, which are flat out lies. But you see what's happened here in our community. One important thing, and I'm going to go over this in part 2 or part 3, is that when we're talking about our school district, where we should be focused on the things that are happening here, not what's happening in Minnesota, not what's happening in these other locations per se. It's stuff that you kind of have knowledge of and that kind of stuff. But just so you know, in the areas of Placentia, Brea, and Yorba Linda, ICE has had almost no interaction with people, looking for people that are illegal aliens or illegal aliens that have committed additional crimes in addition to the first crime of coming over the border illegally. If you come over once, you get kicked out, and you come back again. Now you're a felon. So the first time's a misdemeanor, the second time's a felon. So ICE has had very little presence in these 3 areas. Now there's a little bit more. I think there's 6 arrests that have been made in the city of Anaheim that I was able to find in the last year. But one pursuit of a criminal, and we call them, they're criminal when they come over the border, but criminal meaning they've committed additional crimes, and there was a warrant out for an illegal alien in Anaheim, and ICE tried to make a stop on him, but he fled in his car, and he fled north into the city of Placentia through Fullerton, I think, and then Placentia. Ended up getting in a car crash, killing one of our residents. I believe the person was in their 80s. I believe it could have been 60s to 80s, somewhere in there, and killed somebody in our community. So this criminal illegal alien who fled from law enforcement officers to evade arrest, kills somebody in our community. Nobody acknowledges our community member that was killed. But the one thing they did is make a really big deal that ICE was chasing a criminal illegal alien in the city of Placentia. And there was a post about it being near a school where the guy eventually ran. He was armed with a gun. But that's not important. The fact that a criminal illegal alien ran, killed somebody, had a gun, and then ran into a residential neighborhood that happened to be somewhere in the area of a school. And now everybody's mad because the school wasn't notified that police were chasing people. They were busy chasing the guy with a gun to try to catch him, and most likely so that he didn't even go onto the school campus. But those guys are heroes. But that's not what was said out in social media, that ICE chased unlawfully arrested an illegal alien within the area of the school. And it became more about ICE being near a school, and Fullerton, who was also there, helping them arrest this man. So that became the narrative, not the fact that the guy was a criminal illegal alien with a gun who, with his car, crashed into somebody and killed one of our residents. Nobody cared about that, but they did care about that. Other than that incident, I couldn't find any time where ICE was involved in any kind of takedown of illegal aliens in our area. Their footprint in our Placentia-Yorba Unified School District outside of the school district has been non-existent. And so, but these people that came and spoke were talking as if we are being invaded by ICE, as if ICE was going and knocking down doors all over the community. People were getting up and saying that our neighbors were taken out and the doors are getting kicked down and they're masked and they're armed with weapons of war and they're going to kill somebody. And they create this narrative of something, again, that has not happened. Let me bring you this post, and I'm just going to bring this post to your attention again because it's important that I talk about it again. And this post went up in Yorba Linda Moms. And Yorba Linda Moms and PYLUSD posted this and put it around. And it was one of the basis, it wasn't the only basis, but it was one of the basis for a walkout out of El Dorado High School and Valencia High School. And that's the post, and this is the narrative. And it says, an El Dorado student was wrongfully detained by ICE and held at gunpoint, the student reported. They chased me to my house, and when they got a hold of me, they tossed me to the floor, pointed a gun at me, and asked if I had papers. After realizing the student was a U.S. citizen, ICE agents claimed they stopped him because of a bike infraction. They then accused him, the student, of being involved in a gang and called a gang unit to investigate whether they were a gang member. Shortly afterward, the student was taken to the Orange County Jail. That is a fabrication made up by somebody in our community. Complete fabrication in regards to ICE, in regards to immigration status, and they gave you the belief, because they didn't say where it happened, that it must have been somewhere around El Dorado High School. That was the point of saying he was an El Dorado student, because they didn't say what time of day, but they wanted to give the community the impression, and the people that are vulnerable to believe this lie and to make this lie part of their existence and being. That was the intent of this. There was no other intent, or else it would have wrote it differently, and they would have told the truth. So I went and talked to the Placentia chief of police about the supposed incident, and he told me immediately that this did not happen. He goes, I don't know where this story came from. It didn't happen in the city of Placentia. It didn't happen near El Dorado High School. And as far as he knows, no student from any school in the school district had been arrested and contacted by ICE. He goes, I don't have any information that any of that is true. So with that information, I begin now going out around the communities around us, and contacting the police departments. And eventually I get a hold of Anaheim Police Department. I talked to Sergeant Sutter over at Anaheim Police Department, who is the public information officer. And he tells me this incident is, oh, sorry about that. I got to tell you one more thing. I skipped a very important part. Well, this community member who created this post possibly, or took it as it being hers in the sense that she was going to get involved, she claimed to have a police report. Now, being an Anaheim police officer for years, decades, I said, well, that's odd. She's not related to this person as far as I knew or heard. How would she get a police report? So that seemed odd. But possibly she did. Maybe the kid got a hold of a police report. That's hard too. His attorney, could have got a hold of it. But it just didn't make any sense. So I said, well, I told people that knew her, tell her to produce the report. She refused. Because she probably doesn't have the report. What was produced is a citation. So this citation was produced, and they blurred out everything. So you can't see hardly anything. You can't see what the crime was that he got booked into OCJ for. I could see the police report and the site number. Eventually I was able to make out that the crime that he was booked for, eventually with a magnifying glass and some squinty eyes, that what he was arrested for was 148A1. Which is resisting and obstructing a police officer, a misdemeanor, and booked it into OCJ in addition to being a gang member. So talking to Sergeant Sutter over at Anaheim Police Department, he read the police report to me, and ICE was not involved. There was nothing to do with immigration enforcement whatsoever. Nothing about that story that was posted and created by somebody had anything to do with immigration status. What happened was the gang enforcement unit, and they had a 3-man car out, and they were driving down Euclid, 10 miles away from PYLUSD border, 10 miles into Anaheim on the south end of Euclid. And they spotted this guy, identified him as a gang member through markings on his backpack, the Folks gang in Anaheim. And he fled on his bike, weaving through traffic, causing cars to swerve, brake hard, come to a skidding stop, and trying to evade law enforcement. They were able to drive their vehicles a little bit closer to where he was. They caught up to him. He jumped off his bike and began to run. They did run and tackle him and chase him. As far as the report said, they didn't say anything about removing their guns and putting them in his face. I doubt that they did that. It's something that we don't normally do, is run with a gun out, because we don't want to misfire. And especially when we're tackling somebody, we don't want to do that either. And so even when we're wrestling with somebody, the likely I chased a lot of people, chased them down, wrestled with them, tackled them, and my gun stayed in its holster. So the likelihood that any of these guys took their weapons out is very unlikely, but the report didn't say one way or another. They went through his backpack and his pockets and found that he had other things that associated with him with a gang. So what they were able to do was have some kid, whether he is a former student or a current student, nobody can tell from anything that was written there. We do know that he was an adult. He wasn't a child. And again, what they didn't tell you that in that narrative that they wrote. He is an adult man who's in a gang, who ran from a gang unit, had nothing to do with immigration. He was booked into Orange County Jail. And it is a complete false, fabricated story to attach ICE to it. And they knew that. If they had the police report, if they did in fact the police report, they would see that ICE wasn't involved. They would see that it was the gang unit. So I don't think they have the police report. Again, it's just a made up story. So why do I bring that up all over again? It's just because this and another post I saw about Anaheim police officer arresting somebody that was a carjacker who used a gun to jack a vehicle. He was taken down and a police canine was used to catch him. And they tried to say that was ICE. And it wasn't ICE, it was Anaheim police. They continue to try to blame anything on ICE because we don't have enough of it. We don't have enough or any of it happening in our own community. They're unable to create a true narrative of anything like this happening with ICE. So what do they have to do? They have to lie. And again, I go back to this syndrome, and I just want to read it one more time for people that join late. And that is shared psychosis. Folie is what it used to be called. Folie, a French name. A psychiatric delusional disorder where a person adopts and fully internalizes a false belief or delusion originally held by someone close to them, such as a family member, partner, or friend, which is also social media. In this scenario, the inducer, the person sharing the false narrative, transmits their delusion to the recipient, who comes to believe it as absolute truth, integrating it into their own identity and worldview, despite evidence to the contrary. I wanted to read that again because I produced evidence to the contrary from the very start that I saw this post. I told them with my experience and what I currently now do for a living, and that's investigate these things, that this was a lie. And I produced evidence to the superintendent that this was a lie and a false narrative. I told her I talked to the chief of police of Placentia. I hadn't yet talked to the sergeant over at Anaheim Police Department to get the true story, but I told the superintendent that this was fabricated and a lie, and she refused to do anything about it. And there's two reasons why she did, or one of two reasons why she didn't do that is because she's a coward and won't do that because she fears the teachers union more than the ramifications of telling the truth, or she's complicit and knows that these things are lies, and she doesn't want to, she doesn't care. She thinks that this is the right way to go, and that is to create fear in our community, to be implicit in what's happening in our school district, and doesn't have any interest of calming things down with the truth. And so I called upon her to make a public statement that people need to stop doing this, that teachers need to stop doing this in the classroom, which we know they are. We have proof through things that have been handed out in the classroom, like these ICE cards, which tell them what their constitutional rights are in regards to ICE, which is another way of saying fear ICE. and because they're going to come and get you, and they're going to kick down your door, and they're going to point guns in your face, and they're going to drag you out of the house, regardless if your parents are there or not. They may even do it in the school, which again, they haven't done yet. That is the purpose for putting those cards out. So last night, I'm just going to end it here because I want to make sure that this is very clear as we move forward, because you're going to continue to see this syndrome at work in our community, and why it's important to understand it, and why to have compassion for the people that are suffering from this. There's a lot of them, unfortunately, but there are more parents I know that don't like what's happening. They don't like what's happening to Leander Blades. They don't like what's happening to Todd Frazier. And it just needs to stop. It's going to be difficult to make this stop, because this syndrome has taken hold of a large number of young people in our community, and now all the way into our schools and junior high schools, and obviously our high schools. And it is unfortunate and sad. And we don't have enough parents willing to help their kids. We have, there's a few that are, helping their kids get through this and say, this isn't happening. Here's the truth. This is what you need to know. And you don't need to be fearful. But so this is what happened last night, and this is why it happened, and this is why it's happening. And it is just unfortunate. These lies are going to continue. We're going to see more of these lies. I did see some comments come out. Let me see what people are saying. We have Robin, who says, I watched last night. It was unbelievable. It was so hard to stomach the lies. Absolutely. John Edwards says, no one seeking refuge is criminal. Huh? What does that mean? Okay. He's trying to say that illegal aliens coming across are seeking refuge. My grandparents came over. They found a way. They maybe were seeking refuge, I guess, but they found a way to do it legally. I had many employees in my company who were from all kinds of countries all over the world. Some of the best dog trainers come from other countries. They came here with papers. And some of them came from like Argentina at the time that my lead trainer came. It was a mess over in Argentina, and he did everything. We spent a lot of time and effort and got him over here illegally, which he is now here legally. But it's just it's the lie that they want people to believe that these poor people can't figure. They're too stupid to figure out how to do it legally. That's not what's happening. Okay. Theme, another murder FDO. I'm not sure what that means. Anybody know what another murder FDO means? Okay. There's something, man, I can't read these names. ICE is a bunch of girly men. They need prison time. When do the UN troops get removed from our borders? Do you see this here? These people that don't, they make up these long words. What the meta whisperer? I think it says the metal whisperer. I mean, maybe that's his business. He does metal, works with metal. But you see it here in action, that they have this narrative that has been created from their friends in social media, and it's epidemic. It's an epidemic that's going on right now. David Falcone says, everything people who oppose this are creating the fear in students, so much for protecting them. Absolutely. The thing that they claim that they are trying to do is actually making things worse. They're making more children fearful. They're putting more children in danger, because again, you put yourself out there into these protests, and you are believing this, you're making it part of your life. You're going to do things that you wouldn't normally do, like like when a police officer is standing in front of a car, that you hit the gas and try to run them over, or that you go armed into a group of people and then begin to fight with law enforcement, and now you're armed. So this guy who seemingly had a permit to carry the gun, he was fine. You're fine until you start fighting with law enforcement, at which time you become a felon. In the act of committing a felony, and now you're an armed felon. That's how quickly it can change. It can change from somebody who's legally carrying a gun to an armed felon once you start fighting with law enforcement and become a threat. And that's how things happen. Now, let's just say that these officers could have done something better, but it is this syndrome that have put them into this position, because they've created this scenario as if it was part of their being, and cause them to go out and put themselves in danger. And that's what they're doing to these children now. So it moved from these adults, they're out there blocking streets with their cars and blowing whistles in their ears and tracking them and creating signal groups and having dispatch to be able to track them down and where they're going. They're going far beyond just simple protest. Standing on a street corner with a sign is protest, and yelling and screaming if you want to. But when you begin to now insert yourself into everything that's happening in the community with these law enforcement officers that are federal law enforcement officers, which means they're law enforcement officers across all the United States and its territories. They are real law enforcement officers who are armed, and now you are putting their lives in danger and interfering with them when they're trying to arrest somebody. You have now put yourself in a position to be arrested, and unfortunately, sometimes some type of force is going to be used when you begin to resist so much and they fear for their life. But you have done that. You have created this, the metal whisperer and John Edward, somebody, and whoever else was on there that spoke. And this is the problem. And it's such a bad syndrome that they can't even see that. They can't see that interfering with somebody doing their job is wrong. If these, let's say a group of people didn't like what teachers were doing in schools, and now we lined up in the driveways where they come in to go to work, and we began to throw rocks at them and bricks as they were trying to go to work, it's the same thing. That we should be arrested, and if we resist, we should be taken to the ground, and if we have a weapon and threaten one of the officers, we're taking our chances of being shot. If a plumber comes to my house and I'm throwing stuff at him as he's trying to do his job, at some point he's going to punch me in the face. You can't interfere with people when they're lawfully doing their job, and particularly law enforcement officers who are now dealing with something that's already dangerous. The arresting of a murderer or a child molester or a rapist who is wanted in not only our country, but other countries, when you're going to arrest somebody like that, they become desperate. So they are dangerous. And now in trying to arrest that dangerous suspect, you are putting the officers' lives in danger because now they have to worry about you and the suspect is crazy. But it's the syndrome that is blocking the common sense and critical thinking of these people, and they're putting themselves in danger. Again, I didn't want to go there, but these comments made me go there. That's not what is happening in our school district. If we were just to go back to our school district and understand that never has ICE or Border Patrol came onto any of the school district's property ever. And as a policy, let me just go to this really quick. I was going to skip it, but the DHS policy itself requires, I put it in bold and underline, the DHS policy requires a judicial warrant for accessing private or public schools and areas like classrooms absent exigent circumstances. And no such warrants or entries have been reported in enforcement actions targeting students. So it has never happened. And so here they are at the school board meeting last night, yelling about something that has never happened, is not happening, and never going to happen. And they're acting as if it did. They're acting as if the policy says that they can, and it didn't. They're acting as if DHS doesn't already have a policy of requiring a warrant, which they've never used. They've never used. So it's a policy that's there, but they've never had to apply it. In other words, it's never been a deal. It's never been a situation. It's never been something that they've ever done. And they're not going to do it because they don't want that to be something that happens so that it can be all over the news. They would not do that. Perception is everything. I've dealt with perception with law enforcement all the time. I said, you shouldn't have done that, but the perception is that it was really bad. It's not that they're criminals when they do it. It's just, you probably should have done something else. One thing I was telling my wife, the one thing that we learned in the academy and was taught with us in the FTO program is that when you respond to something where somebody is dead when you get there in the home, but the people believe that the person can be revived, is that you just don't stand there and look at the dead body. You actually take steps to at least act like you're doing something. Give them CPR even though you know they're dead, and maybe even give them mouth to mouth and do something, because the perception of you coming in there and doing nothing is not good for the reputation of the police department. So we're told early on that you should be careful about perception and be aware of people watching. And now, of course, people have cameras and that kind of stuff. And so I know I deal with a lot of Border Patrol cases. I have a ton of them, but they're not stupid people. And it's not like they don't have policies that they have to follow. These police officers get paid a pretty good deal of money and they don't want to lose their jobs. And so they're more likely to follow policy. They're not going in these schools. Just one last thing that just came to me as I was talking, Uvalde. Do you remember the shooting that happened in Texas? And the local police responded and botched it entirely and did nothing and did not think about perception, because the cameras caught them picking their nose, wiping their hands with handy wipes, and talking to each other in the hallway as kids were being shot in the classroom. That was local law enforcement. And I love law enforcement, but that was local law enforcement, and I called them out at the time that happened. Local law enforcement stood by where kids were being shot in the classrooms by the assailant inside the school. Who came there and saved the day? ICE and Border Patrol. ICE and Border Patrol came in and they saved the day. They went in and they addressed the situation. They took out the shooter and they rescued some children who might have been killed if they hadn't gone in. So it's enough of this demonizing a law enforcement agency that is doing the job of serving search warrants and arrest warrants and taking people into custody who have committed a law in our country, and that is their job. They're doing the job that they have been hired to do and swore an oath to, and it's enough of the demonization. And stop putting yourself in a position where they may feel that their life is in danger and have to take action. That is just a fact. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to go on that last rant. I really wanted to stay focused on just this one subject today, but stay tuned for part two. Should be able to get to part two within the next day or two in dealing with some of the other issues that came up last night, which are really important. But I thought it was important to really lay this out. Myself and I think Todd in some way, as we were talking, we just both looked and said, wow, these people have it bad. They have this really bad. And we have to be praying for them and hope that somebody intervenes and gets them the help that they need, especially that last man that I showed the video. All right, my friends, that's it. I'll talk. Oh, this for those of you that are still watching, my wife is speaking at Calvary Chapel Hills tonight. So she'll be interviewed by Jack Hibbs. So if you can get there, that'd be great, or watch on live stream. It's going to be exciting. All right, my friends, that's it. We'll talk to you later. Bye.